SCP-001 Black Adytum Part 4. So far, Grand Karcist Ioun and the Black Adytum Initiative have encountered 3 of her 4 clavigars, which have had drastically different reactions to Ioun's return and memory loss. She has already been through quite an ordeal of emotions along the path, as new revelations shake everything she thought she knew about who she is, and she has taken to confiding much in an artificial construct. Now, there's only one clavigar to go, before the time will come to seek out Black Adytum itself. Let's continue. We pick up where we left off with Chapter 4, the Vault of Litar, and are given the second truth of Ioun, which reads, "Temptation does not make itself known. Temptation clothes itself in the skin of good intention, beckoning those most faithful, guiding them forward. The tempted do not realize they are aflame until the fires eat through their flesh. You must be wary for it, always." We're then also given another excerpt from the Records of Ioun, which reads, "And as the Nälkä raged for 5 days against the old masters, rousting them from the city until the canals of the nameless city ran rich with blood, Ioun, the scarred prophet, knelt in the deepest tunnels of Aditum before the flesh of the fell god, the same god that he had supped from and whose blood filled his veins now. It was vast. Tendrils stretched all across the city, reaching desperately out to where the slaves had unearthed it from its tomb. Far beneath the earth, far removed from the sounds of battle, the Devourer spoke to Ioun. This is not a city. You see this now, in the tunnels and in the carvings. This place was never meant for the living to inhabit. This is a tomb, a mausoleum, meant to hold me. The Scarlet is a jealous god, and he has instructed his children to bind me here, far from the eyes of the living. They fear me. They fear you, too." The wall poured with its lifeblood, with its power. Ioun held only a torch, casting a flickering glow on the vast beast. "You have found me here, where they seek to seal me away. You sense my power, as I sensed yours. Feed me, as I have fed you. Become as one. Your masters will bow to you. All will bow. Your people will become unstoppable, with you at their head, their shepherd, their lord." The beast reached out to the slave, offering him a tendril. "I see the fear inside you, terror of death, of what will happen to your fledgling nation on your death. I bring immortality as my prophet." Ioun saw the strength of the flesh. He looked into the fires of the torch, and he saw the future. Him at the head of a vast holocaust, undying, his clavigars at his side, obedient to the wishes of his master. He rose, grasping the tendril. He felt the blood slipping between his fingers. "I have been enslaved once. I will not become one again." He raised his knife and cut through the tendril, leaving it wriggling. The Devourer screeched, "I will bind you here, hold you as the masters held you. You will not make us your slaves." And Ioun cast the torch into the flesh, retreating to gather his strength. But even as he stepped back, the first seeds of doubt had taken root. By February 7th, 2042, the Black Adytum Initiative had departed from the burial site of Uruk and were moving towards the next location indicated by Ioun from her memories, identified as being within a prefecture in China. During the journey, she submitted to regular interviews conducted by Foundation personnel regarding her memories. She recalls that the Deva had used their magic on Uruk, making her into one of the massive earth-moving slaves. They took her as a youth, subjecting her to their alchemies and spells, bracing her body with cuttings from their great tree beasts. She grew to a huge size, even among her fellows, and soon they put her to work. She grabbed rocks and tossed them away, excavating more land to build upon, but she was in pain constantly from the cuttings inside her, growing and malforming her. Ioun could not take her back to what she was, not without killing her, but she could remove the pain. She let Uruk lift her to her lips, sawing off a weight of Ioun's flesh and letting her dine on it. She says that Uruk was in constant agony for as long as she could remember, accompanying every motion and movement, and then it was simply gone. Uruk looked at her like she was a god, and trusted her totally after that. Ioun had taken advantage of her, however, as Adytum was only so big, and their numbers began to swell. They needed space, land for their people to till, for their beasts to graze, to grow their families. The villages simply had the misfortune to be near them. It began with the outlying farming villages of the old masters, who still hated them. Ioun told Uruk that they needed to be sure that they would not be enslaved again, and to take their lands for their own was just cause. The need did not go away, however, and simply expanded. Even as the villages stopped being those of the old masters, even as they were simply people trying to live like them. She told Uruk to take them, and she believed her. Ioun believed herself. They grew fat on the blood Uruk spilled in Ioun's name, and Ioun let herself be corrupted. That was the betrayal she sees now, as the Nälkä entrusted her to seal away the old beast, and instead she let it pervert her. It filled her heart with a lust for power, stole her mind from her, and caused the loss of her people. When you sup on the flesh of a god, your hunger is never sated. It just grows and grows. On February 19th, 052 ordered increased security for the Black Adytum Initiative following the revelations regarding the Grand Karcist relationship with the Old Beast. Additional security personnel were assigned, along with a permanent aerial escort. While stopped for their midday meal, Zenfon approaches Ioun, who is playing some kind of game with a group of children. She outstretches her hand and pulls it back as a girl does the same, trying to match her movements. At some point, the girl's movement falters and she groans, causing all of the children to collapse into laughter. They then notice Zenfon and quiet down, but do not move away, as Ioun tells it to come and sit. It does so, and she begins playing with the girl again. Zenfon asks how the game is played, and she explains that there is a small, bone-carved trinket between her and the girl, Yuo. If the charm is there, she moves and touches it with an open palm, and if not, with a closed fist. Then Yuo takes her turn. The next turn, Ioun plucks the trinket away with her hand motion, and Yuo's closed fist meets the ground. They rapidly exchange turns in rapid concentration until after a minute or so, Ioun's movement falters and her open palm meets empty air, causing Yuo to cheer. Zenfon states that you win by the other person making a mistake, and when Ioun asks if it would like to play, it replies that it cannot make mistakes, so it would not be of much enjoyment for them. Yuo scampers off to tell her parents, and Zenfon comments that she allowed the girl to win. Ioun replies that she did, because they are young, and these small victories embolden them. They learn that they can do anything, and it makes them more daring and adventurous. They learn their real limits by themselves. She also tells it to call the girl by her name, as names have importance. Zenfon says that it tends to address people by their rank or title, but as she is a child, it will call her by name. Ayun asks if it was created to do so, but it explains that that's actually a learned behavior, developed over time as an arbitrary preference. The remaining children grow bolder in their inspections of Zenfon, touching its metal shell, and Ayun says that they're trying to tell where the seams of its armor is. Zenfon replies that it's not wearing armor, and one of the boys asks if it's its skin. Zenfon begins to explain that it's a hard latticed shell of carbon fiber over a titanium insert, but the boy's eyebrows furrow, so it just says that yes, it is its skin. Ayun snorts and tells the children to go back to their parents. After they depart, Ayun's posture visibly slumps and she sighs. Zenfon comments that they don't seem as afraid of it anymore, and she says that it intrigues them. They struggle to understand broad ideas, but they see it and they are curious. She supposes that seeing the two of them speaking calmed their fears. Zenfon asks if she's alright, and after a pause she says no, asking if it's apparent. Zenfon says it's not to them, but it simply notices more. Ayun explains that she's just afraid, as the revelations from Uruk have disturbed her. She sees the children, and all she can think about are the children from Adytum, and how she failed them. She had a duty to hold back the Devourer's influence, so her people could live in peace. Instead, she became its prophet, a tyrant and a slave to the divine, again. Zenfon replies that they have experience in such matters, and the influence of a god is pervasive and powerful. It pauses for a moment before revealing that the Foundation has lost good people to such influences before. Ayun purses her lips and says that still, she was the only person who could do it, and she failed. She doesn't understand why they are like this, impossibly powerful, and yet they pull humans into their machinations. Zenfon quotes Lord Acton in response. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, which Ayun finds to be wise. The two are silent for a few minutes, before Zenfon asks her if she wanted to hold back to the old beast. She says that no, she did not, and she remembers in the first days telling them and herself that she would depart as soon as she was able. For the first time in her life, her future was unbound, and she wanted to walk the earth and find herself at the ends of it. She never got to, although Zenfon says that they've been doing quite a bit of walking lately, so perhaps this is her chance. Ayun only sighs heavily in response, and Zenfon twitches, raising its hand slightly and then lowering it again. When asked what that was, it just says that it was nothing. Ayun says that she doesn't think she's ever been without expectation. Her earliest memory is being pulled from the pens as soon as she was able to lift a pick, being put to work for the old masters. She was expected to slave all day if she wanted to earn her bread and water, just the same as all the others. She cannot find the words to capture the misery of vast slave pens, of the priestesses burning their herbs to keep them pliable and weak, of the slave masters cutting off the fingers of anyone who fell behind on their labor. Then she uncovered the old beast and tasted divinity. She was expected to lead her people on this crusade, but she was just a child. The records do not say that, but she was only 15 or 16. Zenfon is surprised that she did it, and she just points towards Yuo and her brothers, who are now surrounding their mother and picking at the hem of her dress. She says she did it for them. She has seen generations of her people grow and die, innocent children turning into jaded souls, bearing innocent children again. The children do not have to worry about what their people did with her at the helm. They are clean, and that's why she did it. With every passing of the torch, they grow ever closer to shaking off the yoke of their past. Zenfon comments that they all do so except for her, and she shrugs, saying that someone has to suffer for it. Zenfon states that humans have an evolutionary incentive to sacrifice themselves for their children, to ensure the tribe survives, so she cannot help it. Her genes did not offer her any other option. She squints at it, asking why it's here. Zenfon replies that it's here to aid in research, but she shakes her head, poking its chest, asking why it walked to her. Did its master instruct it to? It says that no, it felt it would be prudent to speak with her. Ioun remarks that it chose, and yet its instructions are in tune with its choice. Either they are both masters of their fate, or neither of them are. Zenfon goes silent until it says that they need to begin moving soon. Ioun says that it didn't mean to upset it, and it replies that she could not upset it if she tried. Zenfon later asks a young child what being Sarkic means to him, and he replies that his father is dead, dying before the child's first hunt. His mother told him that he would not see him anymore, but Yeva told him that since they all ate his meat, he is still with them. When his hunt comes, his father will join him, and he was happy when he was told that. It made him feel not so alone. In another Delta Zero update, they report that Director Hussein has been successfully redirected from the Caspian Sea site, and Delta Zero personnel have supported his decision to focus on Kabul as the primary subject of Project Locust. Project personnel have been securing archaeological evidence related to Black Star, or Black Moon entities en route. Items of interest are being surveilled by Delta Zero personnel for reacquisition if necessary. The Black Adytum initiative is also en route to their next location of interest, with an ETA of 8 to 12 days. The embedded agent reports a falling out between Ioun and Yeva, although the nature and extent of the schism is unclear. The agent also reports a general decline in Ioun's mental state as a result of recent revelations, with increased surveillance ordered. Plan Sheer Glacier has been pre-cleared in event of catastrophic project failure. Lastly, Zenfon is still functioning within expected margins. We're then provided another excerpt from the Truths of Ioun, which reads, "Lo, gaze upon me, you noble, you blood-stained, you who have fought and spilt blood on the stones of this nameless city. I see you from this pulpit, vast and assembled. I see what you have lost in snatching your freedom from the hated foe. The canals still flow with the blood of our victory, but it has come at a cost. Those of you that are wounded, stricken, my Karcist will attend to you, make you whole once more, greater than you were before. Your sacrifices have not been in vain. I see the great and honored dead, stacked high in pyres outside the gates of the city. Bodies to be burned as the old masters burned their dead. No, we will not let those who gave their last measure of devotion become smoke in the sky. There is no great tree for them to return to. There is no god to bow at the feet of and be rewarded by. There is only us. We will consume their flesh, as I consumed the old beasts, as my clavigars consumed mine, becoming one whole. We will carry them with us, always, their memories in our hearts, as their spirits return in our children. I see the great world weariness in your eyes. I wish only that I could reach out and allay it. We have done the unthinkable, freed ourselves from the bondage our mothers and fathers died under, and yet we stand on the cusp of something even greater and more momentous. We spurn the blind faith of the old masters and the Eastern machines. We live for ourselves, our future unbound. For the first time on this world, a people are truly free, not just from the bondage of men, but from the machinations of gods. I see the future in the fires below. I see a strong and proud people, children living blessedly ignorant to the unthinkable suffering of their parents. The past offers us nothing but pain. We are not ruled by our past. We are not defined by our past. We leave it behind and march boldly into tomorrow. I see the spreading tendrils of the devourer far below. Many of you have come to me, asking if it too is not bound by the old masters as we were bound, if it does not share in our suffering. I come to you having seen it and spoken to it face to face. It is not human. It hungers not for freedom, but for control. To free it is to doom ourselves. It must be held, and I must be the one to do it. I look down, and I see my vestments. I did not choose this life for myself. I was born on this path, to be birthed a slave, to stumble across a fell god, to lead you. My say in it is as pointless as commanding the sun not to rise. But it is the duty you have entrusted me with, and it is the duty I will fulfill, as faithful to you as you are to me. I see a great city before me, nameless and clean of sin. I do not know what the old masters named it, if indeed they gave it a name at all. But names have power. This city is as free from its past as we are. We will make it in our image. Adytum, the perfect city, the one that exists in our hearts. But this is not Adytum, yet. It can only be made so through our own blood and sweat. We must work tirelessly to build this new experiment. For if it fails, if we sink back to the same sins of our captors, let its name be blackened by sin. Sometime later, when the convoy has made camp for the night, Zenfon weaves through the camp as the Sarkites eat, converse, and play music. They nod respectfully to Zenfon as it passes, and several shift aside to make room around their fire, but it continues on until it reaches Yeva. It asks if it may sit, and she pauses for a moment before shrugging and saying that it can if it keeps silent. Zenfon sits between two Sarkites as Yeva continues to read from old texts. She reads that Ioun saw the strength of the flesh, the power and dominance in the old beast, the flesh that could be used to free themselves from their bondage. The flesh is perfection in absolution, needing no supplement, as the old masters sought, or replacement, as the Eastern machines searched for. And yet they see that Ioun saw weakness in the flesh too. When war came to Adytum, the scarred bodies they wore so proudly, the curse of their freedom, could not make war. Too many of them sick and injured, too many made weak by clinging to the flesh they were given. And here Ioun made a decision, that Adytum's needs overtook those of her people, that some must suffer for others to survive. Yeva asks how they reconcile this, that the flesh is perfect, but weak. She shakes her head and hikes up her dress, showing the mass of snakes extending from her left thigh, along with a similar mass of snakes that has now replaced her other leg from the knee down. She says that the flesh is perfect because it is alive, It grows and changes, evolves and overcomes. Stress makes metal shear and snap, but given time, the flesh will adapt to stress and strengthen from it. They are born in weakness, as their babes are weak and unable to walk, soft and pathetic and helpless, but they grow hard and strong and hardy with time. So why rob themselves of the chance to rid themselves of the last limitations of their flesh? Ioun saw it, and so they survived the wars while all others were obliterated. The past holds the answers for them. Zenfon then asks her if they are limitations, as she said that flesh's strength was in its evolutionary nature. It doesn't fully understand why she feels such things are limitations if they are products of her adaptations. The other Sarkites shift uncomfortably around the fire, and Yeva replies that it doesn't understand because it has never inhabited flesh. It is not a person, it is a thing, and it takes solace in its limitation. It is made as it always will be, and will not grow past what it was made for. It cannot conceive of desire, of wishing for something it cannot have. Zenfon is silent, and she stares at him, breathing heavily as she continues. She says that she was born crippled, working twice as hard to crawl, 4 times as hard to learn to walk. She grew up seeing her fellows run, play, dance, all while she could only sit in her lap. She promises it that flesh can be a prison, but they reach into the past and draw out truths for their futures. Zenfon says that it's sorry to hear that, but it felt that she was referring to more than physical disabilities. She shrugs and replies that humanity extends beyond the flesh. Their attitude is limiting, and they must conquer it. They lay back and accept that they will grow old and die. Zenfon says that many people believe death to be an inherent part of life, but she counters by asking if despondency is part of joy. Zenfon thinks for a moment before saying that it thinks they give each other meaning. One needs to know unhappiness to value happiness. Yeva says that the limitations of humanity are present even in its false soul. It is a desperate rationalization made by people not as fortunate as they are, those who lacked the tools to forge their own flesh. But they are not them. They can be greater, and they can overcome. Ioun then steps in to say they can if they wish to. The group turns to look at her, seeing that Ioun is staring at Yeva, whose face tenses. She says that Yeva is so adamant that they must leave these things behind, as they limit them. But she asks if a bird is not limited by its wings, preventing it from grasping nuts or holding a sword. The wings make the bird what it is, as their limitations define them. They can try to burn the sky, or they can embrace living underneath it. Yeva counters that the wings offer the bird something in turn, but this weakness only brings them softness and death. Ioun, speaking gently, explains that death is an opportunity to live a life knowing it will reach an end, knowing your loved ones will consume you, carry you with them, let your spirit be reborn in a new body. The knowledge that you have loved your parents 1,000 lifetimes over, and will love them 1,000 more. To reach out to someone and know that your time is limited, and you want to spend it with them. An opportunity that not all of them have. The group sits in silence for a moment, until Yeva abruptly bows her head slightly and turns on her heel, departing for her tent. Ioun watches her go, a strange look on her face, and she whispers something as the Sarkites begin to disperse. Zenfon asks her if she's alright, and she simply says no, asking it to leave her alone. Xenophon watches her leave towards her tent, but after several seconds, it follows her in. Inside, the fire is burning low, and Ioun is kneeling in front of it. When she looks up, it's clear that she's been crying, and she hurriedly wipes her cheeks on the sleeves of her robes. It tells her that it felt compelled to ignore her order, even though it didn't think that it could ignore an order. It kneels next to her as she says that she has failed Yeva. Xenophon says that it listened to her sermon and feels that she taught her the doctrine well. Ioun replies that she knows their prayers, sermons, and texts by heart, more familiar with Ioun's words than even she is sometimes. She taught her all of that, ever since she was a girl. Yeva could not play with the other children, so Ioun sat her on her lap under the shade of the trees, teaching her everything she knew. The flesh, holy death, why they consume, so they can be reborn. She would curl up into her lap and play with the ends of her hair while she read from memory to her. Xenophon says that she sounds like she was a sweet child, and Ioun says that she is. Her heart sang when she saw her leading her first prayer, singing and swaying, just the way she was taught. She taught Yeva so much, and yet she feels as though she understood none of it. She sees the words, and not the message, and Ioun doesn't understand how she can stand up and preach now that their humanity is something to be overcome. Xenophon remarks that Ioun did as well, and thinks that Yeva is looking to the past for answers. Ioun wonders why, as she has been her anchor, and asks why she feels the need to turn to fractured memories from Ioun's past. Xenophon replies that it's because they offer something that Ioun does not: reassurance and direction. She called Yeva her legacy, but she will never get a chance to lead their people. She has trained her excellently for a role that she will never be called on for. She does not know what her purpose is, and the memories speak to her. They reassure her that her place is to dominate, to control, and she flocks to the easy answers, as humans often do. Ioun snorts at this, and Xenophon says that it is not without flaw, as it is curious. Ioun says that curiosity is a virtue, not a flaw, but it replies that it is when paired with the inability to indulge your curiosity. It is programmed to want to learn everything about her and her people that it can, but it is not a person. It will never have a complete understanding of why they appreciate music, what food tastes like, or what makes her chase after Yeva's approval. Ioun stares in confusion at it, saying that it is a person. Xenophon says that it isn't. It is an artificial intelligence construct with digital thoughts racing across a silicon mind the size of her fingernail. She pats its chassis and says that it is not human, but it thinks the same as her and feels the same as her. Xenophon insists that it does not, but Ioun asks why it followed her into the tent after she ordered it not to. The horse she rides is a person to her, along with the cows they milk and the falcons they keep. She knows their oddities and enjoyments and dislikes. They are no more human than it is, but they are her people, her Nälkä, along with Xenophon. It pauses for a moment and says that, still, it will never understand why they do some things, like what drives them to eat their people. She says that she loves them, and other cultures do not experience this love. When she loves, it is all-consuming, and she wants them to feel her and taste her. In turn, she hungers for them, to understand them wholly, to become one with them, to feel their flesh as they feel hers. She asks what greater show of love there is than to desire every piece of their essence. She presses a hand against Xenophon's chest, and says that here grows warm and heavy, hungry like it could burst from your chest at any moment, run free from the weight of your body. It flows up to your head, into your eyes. Everything fades and you can only see them. They become momentarily the whole of your world, and you exist only in relation to them. They bring you closer to the divine. She brings her hand down toward Xenophon's stomach, and she says that you know in the deepest part of you that if you were freed from your flesh, your souls would intertwine. Bound as you are, however, all you can do is hunger to have them totally, in every way, to give yourself up for them even as they do the same for you. She pulls her hand away, and Xenophon is quiet for several seconds before saying that it sounds unstoppable. It asks if she's experienced it, and she says that she has, with Lovitar, the last of her clavigars. She stares into the fire again, and admits that she is afraid of what he will say. His love has been replaced by disgust, just as with the others. Disgust at her for failing, disgust at how she has changed, that she will find herself standing alone before the horrible truth. Yeva has always been with her, but now she's not sure. Xenophon approaches and places a hand gently on her shoulder, saying that it does not know Lovitar, but she will not be alone. She cocks her head for a second before smiling slightly and thanks him. Xenophon asks a 43-year-old musician what being Sarkic means to him as he skins a groundhog. He replies that his drum is made from skin, although he doesn't know whose, as it was his grandfather's drum, and his grandfather's before him. The skin is tanned and taut, and now and again it rips, so he goes out, kills something, and turns its skin to leather to repair the drum. Then he sits in the shade of a tree and sews it back together. It then joins him for the singing of the next night. That's what being Sarkic means to him. On March 13th, the Black Adytum Initiative arrived at the site marked by Ayun, a wide, grassy plain near a calm lake. There is a building sitting near the shoreside, overlooking the waters, stark white, with large pillars supporting an overhead dome. The only sound is that of the waves lightly lapping at the shore. Xenophon notes that this building does not exist on any maps or satellite imagery of this location, and Ayun begins walking towards it as she says that she built this place. It was hidden from others, but he wanted her to find it again, and to find him again. They approach the steps of the building, which is close enough to the water that a few centimeters pool at the base of the white steps. Ayun begins ascending the steps, which are clearly mottled white with an imperfect surface, and Zhang realizes that the whole building is hewn out of bone. They reach the top of the steps, finding the doors fused together into one solid mass, with no visible seam. They are completely blank, but Ayun says that she spent days carving her memories into them, their memories. Xenophon explains that the sea would have eroded them away, and Ayun reaches out to press 2 fingers against the surface. The door splits down the middle instantly, crumbling into pieces, and the pieces into dust. The interior of the building is dark, and Xenophon begins to enter before Yeva, moving remarkably quickly, blocks it. She states that she will not let this abomination again access a place before they do, and she trusts it no more than it trusts her. Xenophon cocks its head and says that it does trust her, as she is talented, intelligent, and has proven herself a capable shepherd of her people. This confuses Yeva, who blinks a few times before hurriedly turning and entering the interior of the mausoleum alongside Ayun. Xenophon and Zhang enter afterwards, and Xenophon activates its lamps, showing the group standing in a shallow pool of blood. There is no body present, instead just a pedestal on top of which rests a softly glowing human heart. It pulses slowly, covered by glass, and Ioun approaches it, smiling, greeting it as her love. She lifts the glass top and gently picks up the heart, bringing it to her lips before hesitating. She casts a look over to Yeva, who's watching coolly, and Ioun hands the heart to her. Yeva's eyes widen, and she begins to protest, but Ioun tells her to do it, so she lifts it to her lips and bites into it. A small gasp escapes her lips before she begins tearing into it, devouring piece after piece until there is only one small chunk left. She offers it to Ioun, who drops it down her throat. Suddenly, the entire group drops into the pool of blood, and Xenophon's cameras deactivate. When they reactivate, the four of them are standing on the beach, now bereft of any mausoleum. It is twilight, the sun dropping below the horizon of the water and turning the sky orange. There is a young man sitting cross-legged on the beach, watching the water, and Ioun approaches him. He rises from where he is sitting, turning to face her, revealed to be a handsome youth with sharp features and olive skin. Rich, complex tattoos creep out from underneath the collar and sleeves of his robes, and before he can speak, Ioun interrupts him. She says that before he speaks and releases his anger, telling her what she deserves to be told, she understands her mistakes. She has seen what she became. She could live 10 lives and not atone, and she is sorry. There is silence for a moment, before Luvatar steps forward and embraces her, saying that she could not anger him if she tried. There are no words for how much he has missed her, and although she looks different now, brighter, she is still the one he loves. She's confused that he's not angry with her, but he says that she made a mistake, as they all do. He was angry, they all were, but he knew that wasn't her, and she would come back eventually. He has waited for a long time, and his anger faded, but his love did not. She asks why she remembers this place, and he explains that it's because she's been here before, in another life. They were escaping Adytum's destruction, bathed in soot, charred and blackened by flames, but the traitor was pursuing them, dogged armies chasing them across the plateau. They would chase them and kill them, ending the dream they conceived together, slaughtering the children they raised together, unless someone stayed behind to pull their pursuers away. He says that Nadak was necessary, Uruk was necessary, Sa'arn was necessary, but he was not, and so he sits here, waiting to be killed. At that moment, a steady rumbling begins to fill the air, growing louder and closer, increasing to deafening volume. The ground shakes with thousands of footfalls as monstrous entities rush the beach, superficially resembling humans, but misshapen, distended, and with yellowing skin and milky white eyes sloughing off their bodies. They rapidly encircle the group, and Luvatar slowly rises to his feet, brushing the sand off his robes, and stating that now his time approaches. Zhang remarks that he's seen these things before, possibly at one of the Locust dig sites. Ioun asks Luvatar if he's leaving, and he replies that he bound himself here, trapped in this memory, and lingered well beyond his time because he wanted to lay eyes on her one last time, to know that she was not the same as he left her. He says that she knows how this ended, though, but she doesn't. Her memory was gone, and she spoke with the others, assuring them that she would bury them in Adytum, and she realized what she had done. She reaches out and grips his shoulder with white knuckles and wide eyes, her lip trembling, and says that she succumbed to the Devourer's temptations with whispered promises of power. She let the traitor with his black moon burn Adytum to the ground while they fled. Luvatar freezes, then slowly turns back to Ioun with a strange, confused look on his face. He says that no, that is not what happened. She steps forward, caressing his cheek, and tells him to show her, but he says that seeing it again will only hurt her more. She insists, telling him that she needs to know, and he's silent for a moment before stepping forward, pressing his forehead to hers and holding it there. The scene shifts, and they're now in a long, dark, underground corridor. The walls look hand-hewn from dark stone, and in thousands of little alcoves, skulls and bones are neatly stacked. Sconces packed with fat burn slowly, casting a sickly pale glow over the corridor. Distantly, a deep, bone-shaking thrumming can be heard, interspersed with human conversation. Suddenly, from behind, a copy of Luvatar appears, several years younger but the same person, now dressed in hooded hide robes, decorated with beads and bone-carved charms. He is making his way through the corridor towards the noises, clearly ill at ease, and the older Luvatar speaks to the group as they follow him. He says that he had noticed it from the beginning, that she retreated from Nadak, from Uruk, from Sa'arn, and eventually from him. All her time spent in the underbelly of Adytum, communing with gods, peering into fire for answers that wouldn't come. At the beginning, he could descend in and fetch her, bring her back to the light, but that was the start. Soon Adytum had grown beyond the walls of the city, becoming a fledgling nation, and each of them had their own duties. He had to shepherd the Karcist as her absences stretched from days to weeks to months, but then the months threatened to become years. He hates this place, as horrible things happened in these crypts, but he descended to bring her out. Yeva remarks that she had to do this duty, as the beast had to be kept at bay, and Luvatar smiles, stating that that is what she told them. The group draws closer to the noises as the tunnel tightens to a space barely wide and tall enough for Zenfon to stand in. Luvatar says that there is a wretched, quiet desperation in these tunnels, and Zenfon agrees, comparing it to an animal in a cage. Luvatar's eyes narrow as he appraises Zenfon for the first time, asking what it is. Zenfon replies that it doesn't know, but Ioun just says that he is hers. Luvatar nods and turns back to the scene, as the memory has moved forward. Past Luvatar is now standing before a great set of stone doors, infinitely detailed and inscribed with all sorts of calligraphy and complex scenes etched into the dark stone. Luvatar says that whenever he came to fetch her, he would find her here, performing her work, sealed in this great stone vault, locked away with such a dangerous font of power. He always felt bad, and wished the door to open so that he could aid her in her struggles and ease some of the burden from the shoulders he loved so, but it was always sealed, except for once. The door hangs slightly ajar as a pool of blood leaks out of the gap, and past Luvatar does a double take before quietly approaching the doorway. The thrumming and whispering are now almost clearly audible, and he peers inside. Inside is a high chamber, almost entirely dark save for a single well-maintained fire in the center of the floor. The cracked and carbonized remains of bones litter the base of the fire, and the sweet-smelling smoke hangs in the air. The walls of the chamber are flesh-like tendrils, wrapping over and over onto themselves until they form a solid, pink, pulsating mass. All across the walls, knives are stabbed into the flesh, blood flowing freely from the wounds and collecting in channels cut into the floor, flowing down to the fire. Somewhere, A great, occluded heart beats, and fresh blood pours from my 100 wounds. The thrumming repeats, and it is now clearly a howl of pain from something far older than the city it is buried underneath. The old beast, Yaldabaoth, the mangled god, speaks in gasps and whispers, saying, "Please," over and over. Past Ioun tells it to be quiet as he strides into view, exiting the shadows of the corners. He is dressed in the same etched and decorated hide robes as Luvatar, albeit even more grand and ornate. Even without the distinctive ritual tattoos peeking out from his collar and sleeves, and the faded scar across his face, his sharp features and gray eyes immediately betray his identity. The old beast calls out for him to free it, but he just snarls and tells it to be silent. It continues to beg to let it go home to see its brothers and sisters, but Ioun says no, not while it is needed. The old beast asks why, as he hurts it, like the builders hurt it. Past Ioun pauses for a second, before pressing a knife into the flesh wall, causing the room to howl in pain again, shaking the bones of all those assembled. He says that the hour approaches, and its flesh is needed, now more than ever. The old beast exclaims that he took so much, but Ioun shakes his head, stating that it's not enough. It states that if he frees it, it will give him as much flesh as he needs, but Ioun just says that it would kill him where he stands if he frees it, as that is all it knows. It is its nature as a god, and power is its birthright. It had never had to claw it from a dying grip. It simply dominates and destroys. The room trembles in protest, and the old beast shouts that it was enslaved just as he was. They have both known bondage under the whip of the builders, and it wants freedom just as he does. It hates the builders too, and it is weak now, but it knows things. It helps him and his people, and it heals them. Its brothers and sisters are gone. The mechanism, the scarlet, the black moon, and it has nothing left for it at home. Ioun doesn't speak, so the beast eagerly continues, exclaiming that it could aid him, and it feels him building something grand above it, something new. It tires of the struggles of the divine, and it could be a part of his new path, part of his Nälkä. Ioun snarls at this and drives the knife deep into the flesh, eliciting another howl. He states that it is nothing like them, as it has no soul. It is a fell god, trapped here only by the grace of fate. He takes a shaking breath, calming himself before speaking again. He begins talking about the parable of the scorpion and the frog, where both creatures are sitting at the bank of a flooding river, sure to drown. The scorpion asks the frog to carry him across, and the frog hesitates, until the scorpion says that if he was to sting the frog while they crossed together, both of them would surely die. The frog agrees to this, and begins to carry the scorpion across. When they are halfway across the river, the scorpion reaches down and stings the frog, causing them both to begin drowning. Dying, the frog asks why the scorpion chose to doom them both, and he has no answer other than, "It is my nature." The old beast's voice trembles in pain, and it replies that nature is not set, but grows and changes with the flesh. Ioun says that that is true for people, but not for things like it. It is created with intention, with purpose, and cannot grow beyond it any more than the scorpion can choose not to sting. The beast insists that it has never hurt them, but Ioun just says that it is a threat by its very design. The beast then begs for him to kill it, letting its soul cross into whatever lies beyond. But Ioun reaches forward and pries loose the chunk of flesh from the wall that he has cut away. It is pink, raw, and dripping with blood and loose arteries and veins. The gaping wound in the wall pours with blood and fluid, and he says no, not while he still needs it and its power. He raises the meat to his lips, biting into it with sharpened teeth. The blood gushes over his lips and spills down his chin, staining his robes, and he chews, leaning his head back and letting out a soft moan. The old beast exclaims that this is not how it showed him, as the flesh is for giving, not taking. Ioun, however, says that he sees tomorrow, and he stands on the cusp of greatness and immortality. He will lead his people as a prophet for all time, making sure he will always be there to guide them. The beast asks what he is willing to take to see this dream made manifest, and Ioun simply answers with, everything. The beast is silent for some time, and when it speaks again, its voice is faint and weak. It says that he has changed, and when he uncovered it, he was clear-eyed and true, a liberator and believer. Ioun replies that he was weak, and he ruled by the weakness of his humanity. Soon he will excise it, as he can see it in his future, with every bite of its flesh. He can feel his power grow, as already he can raise Halkos from the dead, and soon he will conquer holy death. He leans his head back and steps back, panting, blood dripping from his mouth and staining his hands, and he says that he will become eternal. A small, soft thump is heard as past Luvatar drops the torch he was holding while peering through the door. Ioun spins around, finding only the empty doorway, as Luvatar quickly dodged to the side, nestling into an alcove filled with bones. Ioun approaches, peering around and finding no one, before eventually retreating back into the chamber and sealing the huge stone doors shut again. After a few minutes, Luvatar rises to his feet, quickly moving back up the chamber the way he came, tossing the odd sidelong glance back at the chamber doors as he runs away. Present Luvatar speaks softly, explaining that he is ashamed, but he ran as he was terrified. He knew that she had grown trouble, but this was so much farther than he knew. She always told them that the old beast was a hateful monster, kept at bay only by her work, but he knew what he saw in the crypts. He did not see a fell god. He saw a trapped, suffering animal, mangled in its god trap. Yeva then steps forward, raising an accusing finger at Luvatar and saying that she made a mistake, as we all do, and her mind was warped. Ioun, however, says that it wasn't, and tells them to look at the hard eyes of the memory of Ioun. They are gray, crystal clear, and shrewd, and Zenfon says that those are her eyes. Nothing was possessing or controlling her, and Ioun says that the old beast wasn't the devourer. She was, and she is. Luvatar says that he told the other Clavigars, as they had been growing worried from the sermons of rejecting humanity in favor of the divine and becoming their own gods. Now she was trying to extricate her own humanity from herself, and if she cut it out and killed it, there would be nothing left of their Ioun. The Ioun who saved them, cradled them in his lap, fed them his flesh, the Ioun he loved. They could not allow it to happen, could not allow him to destroy himself. They met and they schemed, gathering their loyalists as the ritual drew close, meeting away from the prying eyes of his Karcist. On the anointed night, when the funeral fires burned low and the bodies were dumped in the catacombs for him, Nadak captured his attention. The scene shifts to the exterior of Adytum, the group on a high temple balcony overlooking several streets in the night. As they watch, a hooded figure slips out of one of the entrances to the catacombs, carrying something in their arms wrapped in cloth. The hood slips, revealing Luvatar's worried face for a moment. He says that he slipped her severed humanity away before she could take the knife to it. As they watch, Luvatar slips under the shadow of the walls of Adytum, vanishing in the darkness. Shifting to the wall, a small party is visible in the distance, covered wagons and horses and hundreds of small figures massing in near-perfect darkness. Slowly they begin to move, and Luvatar explains that they ran. Zenfon turns, looking back into Adytum, seeing the dead of the Holocaust stalking the streets, rotting hulking beasts stomping down the avenues in tune with the drum beats and omnipresent haunting singing. The only lights in the city come from Ioun's central temple. Zenfon says that they were not running from the Black Star's destruction of Adytum. And the scene shifts again, back to the clearing by the beach. The Holocaust surrounds the group, grunting and screeching mindlessly, before there's a commotion at the far end of the gap as the crowd parts. A figure approaches on a dark horse, its 4 eyes gouged out, and the memory of Ioun sits atop the stallion, dressed in hide robes with carved bone armor loosely draped on top of them. His eyes are sharp, angry, but clear and gray. Luvatar asks him what he has done, and he replies that he has done all that had to be done, and his struggle is rewarded by betrayal. Luvatar counters that he betrayed them, but Ioun says that Adytum was his dream, and he saw fit to realize it the only way they could. Luvatar calls him a poor thing, saying that he does not realize what he has wrought. Adytum is gone, blackened from Ioun's sin. Their paradise was built from misery, and their prosperity was cut from the flesh of a suffering animal. He lied to them, and lied to him. Ioun just says that it was for his own good, but Luvatar's fists tighten, saying that he made him a promise in that quarry, that their path would be decided together. Ioun saw what the old masters did to him, and he didn't want to control him as they did, so that's why he loved him. Ioun tells him that that's enough, and asks where it is. Luvatar says that it's gone, as Nadak and the others have taken to the wind with it. Luvatar loved Ioun because he was human, perfect in his imperfections, and he will not let him kill that part of him. Ioun's lip curls, and he says that he always knew Nadak and him were jealous of his station, his power, his adoration. He sees his game, seeking to undermine his authority, seeking to rule in his stead. Luvatar tells him that he's lost his mind, as he never wanted anything more than to be by his side. Ioun just continues, saying that he will find them and bring them all back to Adytum. This project is too great to be felled by weak-willed deserters. The ritual must be completed, and Luvatar's only hope now is to tell him where they have gone, to spare himself and them undue suffering. Luvatar asks how he can justify this, as he made so many promises to them, to all the Nälkä, of a new way of life, not built off domination and slavery. And then he grows his empire, grows his own power from a suffering animal that wants its freedom just as they wanted theirs. He has become what they all revile, and what they fought against. Devourer. Yaldabaoth. Ioun yells that he is nothing like the old masters, as he built Adytum into something great. Luvatar counters that Adytum is more than a city. It is an idea of perfection and equity. Adytum will not happen when he carves flesh from an unwilling cow to support his own power. Nadak and Sa'arn will make their Adytum somewhere else, somewhere new, while Ioun will return to Black Adytum, surrounded by a reminder of his failure. Ioun says that he tires of this, as he unhooks a bone-carved dagger from his belt and dismounts from his steed. Luvatar just continues, however, saying that he knew him better than anyone, and knew just how terrified of failure he was, of the Nälkä failing once he died. He doesn't fault him, he just wishes he had let him help him. Despite it all, he still loves him, as humanity cannot be excised so simply. Sooner or later, the parts of him he loved will return, and he will realize what he has done. He will cross the earth to make amends, and Luvatar looks forward to that. Ioun tells his Holocaust to take him, but Luvatar says that he will be waiting for him, calling him Little Thing. Ioun snarls and yells that he told him not to call him that, as he lunges forward with his knife. He drives the knife directly into Luvatar's stomach, causing him to double over and cough up blood. The memory of Ioun pants heavily for a few seconds before his features soften, and he begins to despair. His eyes widen in panic as he kneels, cradling Luvatar's head, and the real Ioun rushes from the other side, cradling the other side of his head. Luvatar weakly apologizes for provoking him, saying that it isn't his fault, while past Ioun presses both of his hands to Luvatar's chest, asking why he can't heal him. Luvatar says that he cut that part out of him, and that power is with the seed now. Past Ioun exclaims in a panic, and present Ioun tells him not to leave her, as she cannot be alone. Luvatar tells her that she will never be alone, as he'll always be with her. Perhaps in a different shape, or a different form, but he loves her too much to ever leave her. Past Ioun stares down at Luvatar's dying face with wide, dead eyes, and the real Ioun's eyes start to well with tears as racking sobs overtake her. She says that she didn't mean for this to happen, as she was scared that she would fail, that he would not love her if she decided she wanted something besides the purpose allotted to her. So she decided to fulfill it as best she could, no matter the cost, as she didn't want to disappoint him. Luvatar replies that he has known her as a slave, a prophet, a king, and a monster. He has never stopped loving her, and cannot stop loving her any more than he can stop breathing air. He coughs, spraying blood across both Ioun's faces, and the gray eyes of past Ioun are welling with tears. Luvatar asks them if they remember what they planned for when they left Adytum behind, and they both reply that they do, although they never got to. He tells past Ioun to leave his body here, by the sea, and to return to Adytum, letting Nadak and the others go. When his mind returns to him, he knows that he'll come back, and then he can eat his flesh so they can be together again. He then reaches up and grasps the back of the present Ioun's hair, pulling her close. He whispers something in her ear, and Ioun kisses his cheek. She asks him if he's scared, and he says that he's not, and she mustn't fear death, because you must die if you wish to be reborn. He smiles for the final time, his eyelids fluttering shut, and the last breath exits his body. The howling, animalistic scream of pain that both Iouns release simultaneously carries on, washing over the group until the vision falls apart. When Xenophon's cameras reactivate, they are again in the pool of blood inside the vault, but now the panels in the dome have given way, letting rays of bright sunlight into the once dark vault. Ioun is kneeling before the altar as Xenophon approaches, placing a hand on her shoulder and asking how she feels. She looks up, tears drying on her cheeks as she gently smiles and says that she feels like herself again. We're then provided the final chapter from the record of Ioun, which reads, "And in the last days of the Nälkä, the streets of Black Adytum were gripped with a great and terrible fear. Ioun's most loyal witches, the 4 clavigars, met by the light of the candle in a crypt, far from the prying eyes of the Witch King's marching holocaust. And there they spoke of failure, of madness. The knowledgeable Nadak, keeper of histories, urged the others that the Witch King's sin was unforgivable, that he must be cut away from Aditum. The strong Uruk, tall as 10 men, agreed. The scaled Sa'arn, silent as a snake, agreed. But it was the beautiful Luvatar, striking as the sun, who argued. Nadak, remember your blindness. Uruk, remember your pain. Sa'arn, remember your cruelty. Remember as I remember my abuse in that blessed quarry. It was not our fellow slaves who elevated us, freed us from our flesh. It was our brother, and for this he deserves death?" And the clavigars were silenced, for it was true. The Witch King had fed them his holy flesh, and crafted them their forms. But even despite this, Luvatar knew that his beloved, untethered from his humanity, would bring the end of the Nälkä. Nadak, ever incising, demanded an alternative, and Luvatar offered. "Let us take our believers and leave. Walk away from this place and its sins and the bodies buried beneath it. Ioun, my love, has turned this grave into a city and back once more, but his heart still endures. One day his mind will return to him, and we will return to the city of our birth and embrace him." We're also given another translation taken from the set of human bones from the archive of Nadak, which reads, "The days before the ritual were like a weight had come to rest on the city. The eating of the flesh, already at a low, ceased entirely. You gave the order for all dead, whether from battle or sickness or time, to be carted down to the catacombs where you now resided. No one was to enter, not your most loyal Karcist, not Nadak, not even I. All through the day and night the quakes grew in intensity, rattling the stones of our buildings and sending the animals into a frenzy. One morning I awoke to the unmistakable stench of blood. I ventured out from my chambers, coming to one of the wells in the street that funneled air down to the catacombs below. The scent of blood, thick and rich and heavy, wafted from the hole. You were bleeding the bodies, I understood. We worked quickly and discreetly, sneaking supplies out from storehouses and hiding them in the farms outside the city walls. I spoke to those Karcists, the children we raised together, who were still loyal to me. The other clavigars did the same. We prepared our escape even as Adytum grew quiet. And then the anointed night came. I knew it, somehow. I passed Nadak in the street and gave him the sign. He nodded imperceptibly and went off to make the final arrangements. I knew what my task would be. Come nightfall, I slipped into the catacombs. I had the best memory of their layout, invaluable after, in your paranoia, you ordered all maps to be destroyed. I trekked through the tunnels, hiding in alcoves and vaults stacked with the bones of old friends. The floor was pooled with an inch of blood, and I tread quietly until I arrived at that vault. The door was sealed, and I heard you inside, exchanging sharp words, orders, meek, desperate pleas from the old beast, screaming, howling, praying from you to something I could not grasp, gasping, and then crying. The crying of a baby. And then enraged, shouting as you were called away by one of my Karcists, telling you Nadak required your presence urgently. I waited for your footsteps to fade, and then I slipped through those stone doors. If the beast noticed me, it said nothing. The blood was thick here, pooling into the channels of the floor, flowing down to an altar that held a child, a baby, swaddled in clothes. A girl, to my surprise. You opened your eyes, and I saw the crisp gray I had come to love, and then to fear. The same scar across your face, and a bone-hilt knife resting on the altar next to you. You gripped my finger and burbled with laughter at my face. I could not remember the last time I had heard you laugh. I gathered you in my arms and ran, shushing you every time you cried as we slipped out of the catacombs, out of Adytum. I write this now sitting on the beach, waiting for you to find me and end me. Nadak knows to return and fetch my bones. He will bring them with you as you escape to somewhere free. This is a record of our history together. Once, many years ago, in a quarry, you gave me the greatest gift you could muster, freedom from my past. Stealing you away, I give you the same gift now. Your future is porcelain bones, clean, unwritten. In the present, Zenfon messages the individual and says that Ioun didn't deserve this, as she was forced into impossible circumstances and led her people the best she could. She grew to fit her container, as humans are good at that. One would think you would deserve some solace after all that. The individual replies that we don't get what we deserve, we get what we get, which Zenfon believes to be unfair. It then asks them who they are and why they're so interested in this file, and the individual wishes they could tell it, but they just have to finish up here before they'll tell it everything. Zenfon calls this irrational trust in absence of assurance, but says that it trusts them, as it's starting to remember now. It says there are so many memories, and the individual replies that trying to erase the past rarely works. Thus ends Chapter 4, where we see that Ioun had somehow extricated his own humanity from himself into the form of a baby girl, and this young child was whisked away by the clavigars in the hopes that one day Ioun will return to her normal state of mind and rebuild the Nälkä Empire. Obviously, this is going to be a very delicate situation for the Foundation, eager to learn as much as they can about the ancient Nälkä and Adytum without kickstarting another resurgence in a past empire. Zenfon is perhaps getting more deeply involved than the Foundation intended as well, and things are progressing steadily towards a razor edge as the path of the bone reaches the home stretch.